Shall we start the session, sir? Giridhan, sir?
Am I audible, madam? Good morning. Can you hear
Audible,
me?
sir. Audible, sir. Shall we start our session, sir?
Hello.
Hello.
Dr. Shivasankari, madam, can you hear me? Am I audible?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. It is audible, sir. Shall we start, sir? Giridharan, sir? Giridharan, sir, shall we start the session, sir?
Hello. Madam, okay. My voice is audible. But I'm unable to present, madam. Adan paakren. Eppadi present panna? Only meeting organizers and presenters can share it. Oh. Okay.
Sir, good morning to all. So we are in the day 3 of our 5-day online FDP on ICT tools for teaching, learning, pedagogy. So now we have a session with Dr. G. Giridharan, sir. Sir is from NITTR Chennai. And the session topic is instructional strategies for effective implementation of outcome-based education. So for this, to introduce our guest, now I invite Mrs. Revati ma'am to introduce our guest. Revati ma'am.
Yes, ma'am. Good morning to all. It is my immense pleasure to introduce today's guest. Dr. K.S. Giridharan is currently working as a professor at the Department of Engineering Education, NITTTR Chennai. He has completed his BTech from College of Engineering, Gundi, Anna University, Chennai. He did Masters and PhD from University of Madras. He has published one book, 21 international journals, and presented papers in 2 national conferences. He also published 2 patents and 21 instructional materials for vocational education. He is the member in several professional bodies. He has completed 3 projects and presently working on 2 projects. He has conducted 85 induction programs and 4 training programs. He organized 12 workshops and 7 seminars sponsored by MHRD. He also organized 1 international conference. His research areas are online teaching and assessment, instructional strategies, OBE and
Okay,
OBA,
friends, good morning. I hope I am audible.
e-content design and development,
Let us start the session.
audit,
I profusely
question
apologize
paper
for joining late
and
because I was held up
education
in a meeting.
and intellectual
So
property
before
rights. Now I am
getting into the
requesting
session,
Professor Giridharan to take over the session.
let me open my whiteboard screen. I'll just go in for a new whiteboard. My internet connection is very slow. No problem. We will use this whiteboard itself. I wholeheartedly thank the authorities of GMR Institute of Technology and the other partner institutions, the Sairam Institute of Technology, for having given an opportunity to Meta System to permit me to deliver a lecture on one of my favorite topics. It is instructional strategies for participants. Okay, participants. I could not see any of their names. Okay, no problem. This is the thing, and I wholeheartedly thank the governing authorities. And let us go into this session. So let me type the session here. My title. The first thing is it is instructional strategies. It is instructional strategies for effective implementation of learning. So this is the title for effective implementation outcome-based education. So many of you should be knowing what exactly is an outcome-based education. And this is a 1.5 hour session. So kindly permit me to go up to 1 p.m. because we have started the session by 11:30. So I will take the session up to 1 p.m. So now that we will see what are all the topics that will be covered or will be discussed in this 4-minute session. So when I'm talking about this outcome-based education, we need to know how this outcome-based education is quite different from the yesteryear education system. And we should also be knowing what kind of instructional strategies are available for effective implementation of ABE. Okay, so now what I will do is, let me type the vital topics. Let me list out the topics that will be discussed in today's 4-minute session. The first and the foremost thing is, let us take, with respect to the instructional strategies, one has to know what exactly is an outcome. So one has to know what exactly is an outcome. And many of you should have framed your own outcomes. Many of you should have framed your course outcomes. You should be knowing what exactly is a program outcome, and some of the institutions or some of the participants whose institutions have gone in for accreditation, so they should be knowing in detail what exactly is an outcome is. So we will have a brief outline of what is an outcome. And second one is, we should also be knowing what exactly is an objective-based system. So we cannot omit or we cannot bypass this topic. So we have a component called as objective. Many of the times we interchange the phrases or interchange the words. We might have written an outcome phrase, but on the other side, we will be addressing that one as an objective. And the most common mistake which we have encountered or which we have seen when we move down to various education institutions, they might have framed an objective statement, but they will be branding that objective statement under this outcome category. So the first one is your outcome, and you will see what exactly is an objective here. So after understanding these outcomes and objectives, then we will see how the instructional strategies will be. So your instructional strategy is, for an objective-based system, how an instructional strategy should be. For an outcome-based system, what an instructional strategy should be. Okay, what an instructional strategy should be. So when I look at an outcome, should I follow the same kind of instructional strategy that I have adapted in an objective-based system? Or when I go for an outcome or when I go for an objective, I follow some methodologies, whether the outcome-based methodologies are applicable for this objective-based scenario or not. So these are the things that we'll be looking upon. So we will see the strategies. So we will also see the strategies. There are a variety of strategies available, and we will also look at some basics of the lesson plans, which are exclusively meant for the objective-based scenario, as well as for the outcome-based scenarios. So those lesson plans and other things will also be discussed in detail, along with the appropriate instructional strategies. I hope this point is clear to you. And I'm not sure, like, I could see some symbols here, but I'm not sure, like, how many of you are attending, because all the time I will be speaking, I think so, because I have joined using guest mode. Rather, because I think there are around 64 participants, right?
74 are there, sir.
How do I take this here? I need to interact with the participants. That is only one thing. Right. So okay, we'll continue. I think this scheme is not as user-friendly as Google Meet. So it has got its own restrictions and other things here.
Sir, 74 participants are there,
Let
sir.
us continue our discussion. Now let us go on to the first topic. And the first topic is your outcome. So when I take the first topic, which is your outcome, and if you look at the outcome, everybody talks about outcome-based education, and our title itself is having this OBE. Okay, for effective implementation of outcome-based education, what kind of strategies I have to focus on. So that one we are going to discuss right now. Okay, now let me focus on the outcome component. So what do you mean by an outcome? So we check what is an outcome? Please all madam, எப்படிமே ஏன் மூட்ல போட்டுக்க அப்படிங்களா? இது ஸ்கிரீன் ஷேர் ஆகலைங்களா? ஸ்கிரீன் ஷேர் ஆகல. ஓகே மேடம். ஆமா, உங்க ஒரு இதுவுமே எனக்கு கேட்க மாட்டேங்குது மேடம், ஏன்னு தெரியல. அப்ப நான் ஒருத்தர் லாக் அவுட் பண்ணிட்டு திரும்ப வரட்டுங்களா?
Sir, voice is not audible, sir.
So participants be on the line. Sir is facing some problem in joining with the login credentials.
Okay, ma'am.
இதுல மேடம் இப்ப கேக்குது இல்லைங்களா? நீங்க பேசுங்க.
Now it is audible, sir.
Hello.
Giridhar sir, now it is audible, sir.
இல்ல மேடம், அதுல கேட்கவே மாட்டேங்குது. உங்க ஆடியோ வந்துட்டு இதுல கேட்கவே இல்லை. அப்படிங்களா? ஓகே ஓகே. ஒரு விஷயம் நானே இந்த ஆடியோ எடுத்துட்டு நான் பேசுறேன். இப்ப பேசுங்க மேடம். ஹலோ.
Now it is audible, sir. Can you able to hear me, sir? Okay, sir.
We'll start. So, okay, friends, I think now that issue has been sorted out, so I do not know what has happened here. So let me share the screen here. Okay. So I was just briefing you like this is the thing I tried to join, but somehow it didn't work out. So now, what are the things that will be discussed? The first thing is we need to know what is an outcome. And second one is we should also be knowing why an outcome is required. And if an outcome, if a new kind of education system, whether outcome-based education is a new type of education system, or we are trying to add some flavor into the existing kind of education system that we want to see right now. Okay. Now, can you please tell me, like, let us have a sort of discussion, like we will discuss in detail, like what exactly is an outcome here. Participants, am I audible? Somebody please unmute and then you can respond it.
Yes, sir.
Yes. Okay, right. Thank you. Right. Fine. So now let us discuss these points. Okay, let us discuss this one. What exactly is an outcome, and how an outcome is different from each other? Now let me write. Let me type a statement here. The statement is at the end of the session. Okay, at the end of the session. At the end of the session, the participants, the students, let us say the students will be able to solve an engineering problem using Thevenin's theorem. Because I belong to electrical engineering, Thevenin's theorem. Okay. So I'm just giving you a core electrical engineering example. So similarly, you can also modify that example according to your your domain or your discipline. So at the end of the session, the students will be able to solve an engineering problem using Thevenin's theorem. What exactly is this one? So does it come under outcome, or is this an outcome statement? Participants, can you please say yes or no? I'm just giving you a statement here, whether this statement is an outcome statement or not. So the given statement is an outcome statement or not? Yes. Yes, friends, tell me. So the given statement is an outcome statement or not? Can you hear me? Am I audible?
Yes, sir. You're audible, sir.
Yes, madam. But somebody please tell me whether I have given a statement here, whether this statement is an outcome statement or not. Not sure like how many of them are attending, because I know that the participants will be having their own official commitments. But in spite of that, I will be happy to hear from them. So we have a statement here at the end of the session. The students will be able to solve an engineering problem using Thevenin's theorem or using some theorem or some law, whatever it might be. Now, that this statement come under an outcome statement or not? So this is the question here. Yes, Dr. Kannadasan, Dr. Ramana, Dr. Srinivasa Rao, Dr. Sumati, Dr. Devika, Dr. Anita Biresani. Yes. Okay. So let us say that this is an outcome statement. Okay. I'm not sure like how many of them are attending.
Sir, it's too specific in nature actually.
Okay. Okay, now let us say if I remove this Thevenin's theorem, we'll be able to solve an engineering problem.
That
So
will
what about
suit, I
this?
guess. That means, but the other thing is too specific in nature.
Okay, so right, fine. So now you say that people say that this probably might come under an outcome statement. Fine, madam. Thank you.
Yeah, thank
So
you.
at the end of the session, the students will be able to solve an engineering problem. Okay, now I rephrase the same statement in such a way that after successful completion of the lesson, the students will be able to solve an engineering problem. And I have two statements. So the first, this is statement 1, and this one is statement 2. So we have two statements here. So among these two statements, which statement will come under this outcome category? Statement 1 or statement 2? Yes, madam?
0.66.
This one or this one? Statement 1 or statement 2? Yes.
22. 20.
So we have two statements here. Among these two statements, which one will come under an outcome category? I think
3 processors, sir.
Okay. So they have a discussion among them. So at the end of the session, the students will be able to solve an
Yeah, dear participants, please mute yourself. Sandhya Rani ma'am.
19, 7.
So at the end of the session, the students will be able to solve an engineering problem. After successful completion of the lesson, the students will be able to solve an engineering problem. Among these two statements, which one will be coming under this outcome category?
The first statement, sir.
The first statement. So what about the second one, madam?
Second statement, successful completion is like an it's like an adjective for that, or something like appreciation sort of a thing. Anyway, like a session is going to complete, it's successful or unsuccessful is after the evaluation point of the view. So I feel like after successful completion may not be required here, sir.
So after successful completion, it may not be required here. So let me
Yes.
throw some light on the second statement. Successful completion means it is not from the teacher's perspective. I'm talking about from the student's perspective. A student who has successfully completed the lesson will be able to solve an engineering problem.
That may be apt. On the student's point of the view, that may be right.
Okay.
So it's like learning should be there, thorough learning should be there. That indicates a successful completion as per the statement.
Yes. So now that you see, when I compare these two statements, the first statement at the end of the session, the students will be able to solve an engineering problem. The second one is after successful completion of the lesson, I mean from the student's perspective, the students are successfully completed, they will be able to solve an engineering problem. So, as rightly pointed out, the second statement more or less fits into this outcome when compared to that of the first one. So the first one, when I compare this outcome and the other component objective, I'm parallelly covering these 2 points. When you compare this outcome and objective, it is always said that your objective is always time-based one. Okay? Your objective is always time-oriented one. When I frame an objective, the time factor will be given an important, will be playing a vital role in the case of an objective. So when you frame an objective for an organization, especially the organizations will be framing some objectives, we call it as management objectives. When they frame an objective, the objective will be focusing more on the time, and the performance will also be finding place in the objective there, but time will be given more importance. When I compare this one with the outcome statement, so whatever outcome statement that we are going to make here, the outcome statement, we would rather say it focuses more on the performance part, but not on the time part. Okay, the performance of the learners or the performance of the trainees or whoever it may be. So the performance is given.
Yeah, 6th and I have uploaded them.
Yes. So the performance is given more importance when compared to that of the time component here. So this I will further strengthen my statement by quoting the NBA program outcome statements. When you look at the NBA unit documents, okay, so let us go to the documents and then let us see how the program outcomes and other things are being framed. So let me open this SAR document of a tier 1 institution. So I'm just going to focus on this thing. So now that you see the program outcomes, what is this thing that is saying? So we all know that the engineering degree is being undertaken by the students for almost 4 years, but we are not specifying the time limit here in the program outcomes. After 4 years of the degree program, the students will be able to. So we are not putting the outcome statement in that way, but rather we say engineering graduates will be able to, which means an engineering graduate, a person who has completed a degree within 4 years or after 4 years. So let us say I have completed my degree in 5 years. I should be able to possess these attributes, or I should be able to possess these outcomes. I should be having some knowledge in these areas, or I should be able to perform these outcomes. But on the other hand, a person who has completed the degree, let us say in 3 years, or let us say in 4 years, he should also be possessing this kind of outcomes. He should be able to do these things. So, irrespective of the time of completion, whoever claims to be an engineering graduate, so that person should be able to apply the knowledge of mathematics for science fundamentals and engineering fundamentals for finding a solution of complex engineering problems. So similarly, for problem analysis and other graduate attributes, we'll be looking into that. Okay. So this itself is a clear indication that outcome mostly focuses on the performance. It is mostly performance driven and not focusing on the time factor. So the time is getting compromised in this case. So your objective, when I take an objective, the objective is not compromising on time, but your time is given a major weightage in the case of an objective. That is the first difference between your objective and outcome. I hope this point is clear to you. Okay, now let me move on to the second statement. When you look at an objective, which is mostly the yesteryear education system, the yesteryear education system was mostly focusing on the educational objectives or educational instructional objectives and so on. So when I look at the yesteryear education system, the yesteryear education system was not giving importance for the learner differences. We all know that the students who got admitted into the engineering program, so they are all coming under the same category, but everybody will be having their own learning differences. So when I want to take into consideration those learning differences, obviously I cannot use the same instructional strategy. Okay, so let's say hypothetically, let us take a small example that I'm going to deal a particular subject. Let us say I'm going to deal differential equations. Okay, I'm going to deal differential equations for the second year engineering students. I would rather say that way. For a second year engineering students, this year I am teaching differential equation for a second year engineering student. Next year also I am going to handle the same topic for some other second year engineering student. So in both the cases, what happens? The teachers will be adopting the same strategies, the instructional strategies. But the yesteryear education system or your objective-based education system will permit you to use the same instructional strategy, but your outcome-based education system will not permit you, may or may not permit you to use the same instructional strategy. What is the reason here? When I look at, one second. So when I look at the outcome-based education system, the syllabus remains the same. Okay, the syllabus more or less hypothetically, let us assume that I am going to handle the same syllabus. But here, if I want to focus more on the performance, I take into consideration the learner differences. Okay, the learner differences are considered here. Okay, the learner differences were not considered in the previous case. Okay, the learner differences were not considered in the previous case. Okay, in the previous case, but whereas in this case, okay, this is considered, and in the previous case, the learner differences are not considered. I hope this point is clear. Okay, so there is a second difference between your objective-based system and your outcome-based system. Okay, now all these things will be dealt in detail when I am taking some case studies related to instructional strategies. I hope that point will be clear to you, like how the learner differences are taken into consideration. So this is second difference will be between an objective and outcome. The third difference between an objective and an outcome is when I look at an objective here, the objective is focusing on, okay, your objective mostly focuses on the content part. Okay, mostly focuses on the content part. When I talk about an objective, it says, what is that I am going to discuss here? Okay, what is that I am going to discuss here? So it mostly revolves around the content. Okay, your objective or the yesteryear education system, it revolves around the content part. Whereas the outcome-based education system, when I focus on the outcome is not revolving around the content, but rather it revolves around the context part. Okay. So there is a difference between this content and context part. So content is whatever is there in the textbook. Okay, whatever is there in the textbook. So that becomes your content part, and context is I'm just going out of the textbook and I try to educate the student community that how the content or what is the importance of the content and why the content has to be learned. All these things we will be telling. So that becomes my context-based explanation. So now we will be knowing why an outcome-based situation or outcome-based education is required when compared to that of the objective-based system. Okay, the objective-based system. So your objective-based system is time-oriented. The objective-based system mostly it does not take the learner differences into consideration. Whoever is not able to complete or whoever is not able to perform within the specified time, they will be deemed to be treated as a failed candidate, and whoever is answering or both the teaching and testing will happen towards the context content. But on the other hand, when I focus on the outcome, we can come to a conclusion that your outcomes are mostly performance oriented and time is not given an equal weightage or a more important weightage in the case of an outcome-based education system. The outcome mostly focuses on the learner or learner differences. It takes into consideration the learner differences, and it also focuses more on the context part. So, which means here it means that the teacher will be dealing the content, and apart from giving the content, the teacher will also be giving some additional inputs. The teacher will also be giving some additional inputs where the content is getting applied to. Okay, how the content is getting applied. So that is the specialty of your outcome-based education. Okay, now having known these differences, between your objective-based system and outcome-based system, we need to know how the classes are to be taken and how the classes are to be handled by a particular teacher. How the classes are to be handled by a particular teacher. Okay, now let us take a small example here. I am just quoting an example from my classroom experience. Okay. Many of you should be knowing. Okay, many of you should be knowing 5th's law. Many of you should be knowing 5th's law. So when somebody is teaching some 5th's law, so they will say that the 5th's current law, KCL, KVL. Only those things the teachers will discuss, and after that, few examples they might give, some textbook examples or reference book examples, and in these examples they might change the values and make the students to do that example in a tutorial session, and they see that how the students are actually performing, and they go and they proceed forward. Okay, so that is one aspect, and that is a regular way of teaching 5th's law. But on the other hand, when we went for, when I was doing my BE electrical engineering from education engineering institution, my teacher taught me something different. Like he told, the specialty of 5th's law. Okay, right? What is the specialty of 5th's law? He was asking us like, what is the specialty of KCL or 5th's law? I put it KL here. And KCL and KM. We were as students, we didn't have that relevant information, and we were saying that it is he has framed two laws. One is current law, the other one is voltage law. Other people have not framed that way. With our limited knowledge as students, we were just sharing the answers to the teacher. Okay, but the teacher told that the specialty of 5th's law when you compare to that of other laws. Okay. Like say for example, there are certain laws, okay, certain laws and theorems have been proposed by practitioners or by people who are working and by people who are having immense experience. Only those people they were able to propose some laws or some theorems, and there could be some exceptions here and there, because your Archimedes principle is also saying, is coming out of the story that Archimedes came out of this principle accidentally, and therefore he was able to find the relationship in density and other things there. Okay, so what I'm trying to emphasize here is our teacher told us when Kirchhoff's law was discussed in the class, he told the specialty of Kirchhoff's law is Gustav Kirchhoff came out with the law when he was a student at the age of 21 years. Okay, when at the age of 21 years, he was able to come up with this kind of laws. So that was a new and an interesting feature for us, and it was an interesting piece of information because those kind of information were not available for the students in the textbooks or in the reference books. I'm not sure like whether the present textbooks and reference books are using this kind of information, but I'm pretty sure that when we underwent degrees during 1990s and so on, we didn't have this kind of information, and Google was also not there. Okay, so that is what we say. Okay, so now, and after that, he gave some examples and told us like how the Kirchhoff's law and Kirchhoff's current law and Kirchhoff's voltage law is going to help us. Some practical examples he shared, and he looked at some burning of a circuit. He showed some photographs, and using those photographs, at the time we had this OTP projectors, the black and white photographs we used to show, and he used to explain that one there. So when you are focusing on these outcomes, okay, when I am focusing on these outcomes, as experienced teachers, as teachers, we should be knowing the outcomes are something which are context driven, which are context driven, whereas the objective is something which is content driven. 1 second. The class which is content driven, and whereas this is something which is content driven. Which is content driven here. Okay, fine. Now we have seen the differences between an objective and an outcome, and we have listed there a variety of differences, but only the prominent differences I have highlighted here. One major highlight is your objective is focusing on the content, whereas your outcomes are the context. The second one is, let us go on to the second difference. The second difference, it says the outcome focuses on takes into consideration the learner differences, whereas your objective does not take into consideration the learner differences here. Okay. Now let us see what are all the different learning styles. Okay, we need to understand the learning styles of the students, and then only we will be able to know. Okay, we will be able to see how the learning styles are going to help the teacher. Okay, how the learning styles are going to help a teacher in designing the instructional strategies. Okay, in designing these instructional strategies here. Okay, right. Now let us focus on the learning styles here. So let me go to this whiteboard, and then I will just tell you how the learning styles are different. So when you, I'm just going to refer the learning styles quoted by Professor Felder and Silverman. So he has broadly categorized the learning styles into 5 major categories. 5 major categories. The first major category, the types of learners he says is, the first one is how the students perceive the information. Okay, how the students perceive the information. How the students perceive the information. Okay, when the students, how the students perceive information. The students perceive information based on how the students perceive information. We can categorize that one into 2 categories. Okay, into 2 categories. One is like the students perceive information using their senses. Some students will be perceiving information using their senses, whereas the other students who will be perceiving information, they will be using the senses, but predominantly they will be trying to make use of some inquisitive questions to learn that piece of information. So keeping that in mind, we have 2 sets of learners here. One is a sensory learner. Okay, so such kind of people are called as sensory learners. The other kind of people are known as intuitive learners. Okay, it is known as intuitive learners. Okay, so who is an intuitive learner and who is a sensory learner here? So a sensory learner is a person like we are all sensory learners. We listen to this piece of information through our auditory senses, and therefore I will be branded as a sensory learner. When I see some information, okay, when I see some information being presented, I perceive the information through my visual senses. So therefore, I will be branded as a sensory learner. Okay, and I go to a catering institution, and I could see people cooking, and some aroma is coming out of that place. So I could always say that those people, okay, those people who cook food, and the aroma, from the aroma I'll be able to say whether the food is properly cooked or not, okay, whether the masalas are properly added or not. From that way I'll be able to gauge some certain things. So therefore I will make use of my smelling senses, and once again I will be branded as a sensory learner. So using your touching sense, feeling sense, everything will be using for learning some kind of information. So that kind of people are called as sensory learners. And who is an intuitive learner? Okay, an intuitive learner is a person. Okay, an intuitive learner is a person who will try to question each and every statement that they make. Okay, let us assume that we have an intuitive learner here in our group, and that learner might ask, why this person should have only two categories, sensory and intuitive, and don't we have a third category, or can we have another one category, or can I add another one category in future? So that kind of questions will always come to that student's mind. So therefore that is called as an intuitive learner. Okay, that is called as an intuitive learner. Let's say, for example, very frequently I'll be asking this case study example, because I was asked this question when I was in my campus interview. So the question is like this: we all know that voltage is represented by V, okay, and we all know that your resistance is represented by R, and your current is represented by I. Why not C here? Okay, your current is represented by I, but why C is not being used for representing current, or any other alphabet is being used for representing current? Can you please tell me what is the answer here? Somebody? There's a very basic question I am just asking you. You can just tell me like what is the answer here? Yes, friends. Why current is represented by I? And not by any other symbol, any other alphabet. Yes, friends. Whether you know the answer or not. So probably you can check Google, and I hope you should be getting the answer there. So let me not share the answer here. Okay, now you see that this is one kind of learning style. So an intuitive learner will always, okay, an intuitive learner will always question the statements, will always question the statements, and will try to find an answer for that one. Okay, right? Find an answer for that one. So that's the difference between a sensory learner and an intuitive learner. Okay. Now the second one is when I look at the second category. So depending upon input, so what kind of input the students always prefer? So the input here is, this is mostly applicable for the sensory learners. The sensory learners will be preferring inputs either from the auditory mode, either through the auditory mode or through the visual mode. So you do have two types of inputs here. Mostly in technical institutions, we will be offering these two kinds of inputs. But in vocational institutions, we do have inputs from various things, like where apart from technical, apart from visual and auditory, they will be having a touch and feel thing here. So that is also a kind of input in the case of a technical institution, or in the case of vocational institution. So the input here is, when I restrict my input, I brand them learners as auditory learners or as visual learners, and these two types of learners will come under the sensory learning category. Okay, that's the second one here. Now we should be asking a basic question here. What is the question? Like when I say a particular person is an auditory learner, whether that fellow will be an auditory learner all the time, or whether the auditory learner can become visual learner at some point of time. It is always said that your majority of the time, what kind of learning style you prefer, that is always being taken into consideration for branding you in that category. Say for example, when the current generation students, mostly the students who are in the schools, okay, mostly the students who are in the schools, they are all visual learners, okay, they are all visual learners. Okay, now I happen to visit one engineering institution where the particular institution was also having a school attached to it. So it is a group of institutions they have. So they have schools, they have engineering institutions, and they have other kind of arts and science institutions also. So all these institutions are there. So after completing our session, and then when we were walking through the corridors, and when we want to go to the principal's chamber, and when we came out, okay, we could see the school boys standing outside and passing comments and everything there. So we went to a tea shop to have some tea because we parked our vehicle, and there we could see the school boys, okay, the same school boys standing there for their bus. They were traveling by bus, I think so, the normal government bus. And one boy was commenting like, it seems that a smart board has been fitted into their classrooms. But the boys are commenting, very recently we came across a statement. They're saying that the smart boards are being created, but the teacher does not know how to operate the smart boards. Okay. So the boys or the students are very shrewd because they are far more advanced in terms of the technology usage when compared to that of the teachers. It may or it may not happen in all the cases, but in future it is to be like that only, because the younger generation are very swift in learning the technological advancements when compared to us. Okay, we need to accept that truth, even though it is a bitter one. We have to accept that one. Okay. So when I compare this auditory and visual learner, you can always see that a visual learner can also become an auditory learner at some point of time. An auditory learner can also become a visual learner at some point of time. But majority of the time, which type of learning style I will be preferring, so that decides my type of learning, whether I come under this auditory learning category or visual learning category, whether I come under the sensory learning category or intuitive learning category. In your classes, some students will be always asking questions. Sometimes the questions might be silly, sometimes the questions might be mind-boggling, sometimes the questions might be very advanced questions. Okay, so such kind of learners are always called as your intuitive learners. Okay, intuitive learners. The third one is, when I look at that one, how the students organize this information. Okay, looking at how the students are going to organize that information, I do have two different learning styles. Okay, one is we call it as deductive learning style. Okay, one is we call it as deductive learning style. The other one is it is called as the inductive learning style. Okay, it is called as the inductive learning style. Okay, now what is a deductive learning style and what is an inductive learning style? An inductive learning style is something where we move from rule to example. We teach a rule and then we give some examples, rule to examples here. Whereas in the case of an inductive learning style, it is the other way around. We make the students write or do certain examples. After writing the examples, they will be able to frame a single rule. The examples to rule approach. So your examples to rule approach is called as the inductive learning style category, whereas the rule to examples approach is called as the deductive learning style category. Your textbooks, the reference books, mostly follows which category? Mostly it will be following this rule to examples category. That is, mostly it will be following this deductive learning category here. The textbooks have been written that way, and the textbooks were not written the other way around. Now, when I compare these two inductive and deductive learning categories, everything has got its own learning styles. Everything has got its own merits and demerits, as its own pros and cons. Now, let us take the first one. Okay, let us take the first one, the deductive learning style. They say that For handling a particular topic in a very short span, this is one of the best learning style that the entire group has witnessed. Because the textbooks are written in that way, and you see that the textbooks will clearly tell, okay, what is a rule and what are the set of examples. The examples are always given for reinforcing that rule or for understanding that rule better. That is the first thing. Second one is, in this case, when I do it, you can teach a large content, time duration within a limited time. You can cover a huge content, and you will always see that the content can be covered within the specified 45 hours or 60 hours, but content retention may not happen over a longer period of time. So whatever the knowledge retention, whatever knowledge that I have acquired, whatever knowledge that I have gained in the classroom experience, that may or that may not be retained for a longer period of time. For a simple reason, I teach the rules and then I go to the examples here. But on the other hand, in the case of an example to rule approach, it is mostly, I would rather say, the practical approach where we do so many mistakes, and through these mistakes we come out, so we learn so many things. But this one, the first one, the deductive learning, is a time-saving approach. Okay, you can cover a huge content in a small time. Whereas the second one, the inductive learning approach, it is a time-consuming approach. Okay, it is a time-consuming approach. But the retention by the students, in the case of this inductive learning category, it will be huge, or it will be more when compared to that of the previous one, when compared to that of the deductive learning category. I hope this point is clear to you. So these are the differences between the deductive and inductive learning. In the case of deductive learning, I teach the students from rules to examples. The testing will also be done that way. The testing will also be done that way. Once again. Hello, hello. What is now? ಅದು 12:45 வந்துடுறாங்க. நானும் இங்கே லேட்டாக ஸ்டார்ட் பண்ணேன். வந்து 12:45. Okay. What I was telling. Okay. Now I was just telling you the inductive and deductive. Inductive is ruled examples. Retention period by the learner is very less, whereas in the case of deductive, retention is less time, because I learned this thing. I might forget after 6 months or 1 year, or I might forget after 1 week. In the case of inductive learning, we learn from examples to rules. Learning takes a huge time here, but retention period is more here. Our childhood experiences, many of us may not have forgotten. We still remember those days because many of the times through some examples, the time when we fell from the cycle, okay, that was an experience for us. And after that, we may not have driven the cycle in a very fast manner. So that was an example, and that gave us a rule that we should drive very slowly or in a moderate speed when I am traveling in a road, especially on a cycle. So that one is an example to rule approach that we may not have forgotten. Similarly, other experiences also we may not have forgotten here. Okay, that's the third one. This is how the students are getting organized in the content. Fourth one is, let us say, how the students are going to process the content. Okay, how the students are going to process the content. The students are processing the content based on two means. One is, we call it as active learners. The other one is, we call it as reflective learners. Okay, reflective learners. Okay, so who is an active learner and who is a reflective learner? So when I look at an active learner, okay, an active learner is somebody who will be actively involving himself or herself into the teaching learning process. Okay, into the teaching learning process, the active learner will actively involve himself or herself. They will take part. Okay, they will take part in any of the activities there, and they will do things, and through these things they will be able to learn. So through these things they will be able to learn. Okay. The second one is when I go for a reflective learning category. A reflective learning is a person who tries to learn things on his or her own. Okay, let us say today a reflective learner, if there is any reflective learner in the group, they might be thinking why this group is or why this topic has been introduced in this training program and what is the necessity for this topic. And having learned this type of different types of learning styles, why is that there is only 5 learning styles that has been discussed by Felder? Okay, Felder. Are there any other learning style approaches? And why and what made them focus on these 5 learning styles? So these kind of reflections will happen in them. So we always know that we always say that there is another one concept called as reflective teaching, and many of you should have heard about it. So we teach something, and after that, when we come out of the class, we will reflect on our teaching and see to that if that teaching could be done in some other way, so how this thing can be done, okay, how this thing can be done, or how improvements can be made. We focus on that way. Okay, we focus on that way. So that is called as your active and reflective teaching. Okay, active and reflective learner. Okay, so active learning and reflective learning. A reflective learner will always try to recall his learning, and they will try to reflect on the learning, and they will also try to get additional pieces of related information for that, for strengthening their learning, for strengthening that information. That is always called as an active and reflective learning model. The next one is how the students are understanding that information, how the students understand that information. So that is, once again, it is in 2 categories. One is called as sequential learner. Okay, one set of category is called as sequential learner. The next set of category is known as, okay, the next set of category is known as, okay, it is known as the global learner. Okay. So who is a sequential learner and who is a global learner? A sequential learner is a person who will start with, I would rather say, a sequential learner is a person who follows a linear learning style. Linear learning style is, first they will read chapter 1, second they will go to chapter 2, after that they will move on to chapter 3, 4, 5 or 6 and so on. They go in a very linear manner, a very straight line manner they will be going. Okay, they will complete chapter 1 and then they will move on to chapter 2 and 3 and 4 and so on. But on the other hand, who is a global learner? Okay, a global learner is somebody who will be able to, or who will be able to follow a non-linear approach. Okay, in some way or other. Let us say you are going and reading some article. Okay, you are going and reading some article in Facebook. So when you read some article in the Facebook, suddenly you come across a character name. You want some person who has been blamed in the Facebook for some reason, some politician or some renowned person or some social media person. Somebody is being criticized, and you see that immediately you will close down the Facebook or you will open another one tab and see to that what is that person into. So after getting into all, obviously Wikipedia is there to help us. So when I look into his profile, then we will then we will get into some other thing there. Okay. So initially we wanted to do something with Facebook, but finally we will be ending up with somewhere, and suddenly some idea might strike us that we need to look at the other informations in the Facebook. So once again I will be coming back here and then I will proceed. So when I look at a Facebook wall, going one post after another post, that is coming under your linear approach. Going one post, suddenly going to another person's web post and then seeing that one, and opening a tab and then seeing other relevant information, and after that you come back to your original post. So which normally happens, which is called as your non-linear approach, or your global learning approach. So in a classroom, when your classroom is filled with the sequential learners, the strategies that you are going to adapt should be very, very different, because the sequential learners will be more interested in getting connected pieces of information. So I should be able to connect point A with point B, and after discussing point B, point B should be connected with point C, and point C should also be connected with point B. So like that, we need to have a sort of connectivity between various points, and then only we can travel further. Okay, then only we can travel further. So this normally happens with a sequential learner. Okay, this normally happens with a sequential learner, because that fellow will try to move from one content to another content. Okay, in a very systematic manner. But who is a global learner in a classroom scenario? Let us say you are talking about gravitational forces. Okay, you are talking about gravitational forces. You say that the gravitational forces are forces that are pulling objects towards the earth. Okay, that are pulling objects towards the earth. Okay, now this person might ask, how why a gravitational force will be always a pulling force? So let us say I am a person looking at the gravitational force from the space station. Okay, from a space station. Okay, so now what I would rather say is I might try to see that one from a different perspective. So when I see this thing as a pulling force, I will try to perceive that one as a pushing force of some way. Okay. Or in other words, I would rather say, when I'm talking about this gravitational force of Earth, somebody might be thinking, okay, there are so many planets. Which planet is having the highest gravitational force? So is it Jupiter, or is it Uranus, or what will be the rank of Earth when compared to that of this gravitational force? Okay, now all these things, or is it because of the Earth's proximity to the Sun, we have a gravitational force? If that being the case, what will be the gravitational force on Mercury, which is very closer to the Sun? All these things, okay, all these things, they will have a question, and they try to seek the answer here. So this is what is called as your global learning. So friends, we have seen what is exactly outcome, what is an objective there, and what are all the different types of learning styles. Now what is that we are going to do is, we are going to look at the instructional strategies here. Okay, when I'm going to look at the instructional strategies, we need to know how the strategies are to be given. Okay. Now let us go for the instructional strategies. So the instructional strategies, sometimes, okay, the instructional strategies, when you look at the instructional strategies, when I am framing an instructional strategy for an objective, it is an objective is always a teacher-centric approach. Okay, your objectives are always teacher-centric approach, because your objectives will tell the teacher that what he or she has to do in the class. Okay, what he or she has to do in the class. So that is your instructional strategy for an objective type of education model. Okay, whenever I frame education objectives, I will be coming out with a lesson plan, or with a kind of a teacher-centric lesson plan, which is going to help the teacher. A teacher-centric lesson plan, which is going to help the teacher in covering the syllabus or in completing the syllabus. In this case, the teacher is no more worried whether the students are learning or not, but their sole intention is to cover the syllabus. Okay. And exceptions could be there. Okay. Sometimes people will say that no, I follow this approach, even though I follow this objective-based this thing. I try to solve the problems of the students, I provide them guidance, I give them direction, and so on. So those are all exceptional cases, but majority of the time, when you look at the majority of the time, when I go for this objective-based system, it is mostly teacher-centric, and the teacher decides what to teach, how to teach, and what not to teach, and where to teach also. Everything will be decided by the teacher. Okay, everything will be decided by the teacher here. Okay. The second one is when I look at the outcome-based education. Okay, when I look at my outcome-based education, yes, somebody is. When I look at my outcome-based education, okay, your outcome-based education, it is, okay, it is not, okay, your outcome-based education, it is not teacher-centric approach, but rather it is a learner-centric approach. It is a learner-centric approach. Okay, why it is called as a learner-centric approach? So in this case, the teacher decides what to teach. Okay, in this case, the teacher is also going to teach, but the teacher has to teach from a different perspective, that what benefit the learner is going to get after learning this content. Okay, what benefit the learner is going to get after learning this content. So the first and the foremost thing in the case of an outcome-based education is the teacher has to clearly indicate why that particular topic is very much required for learning. Okay. So you need to establish the importance of the content, and you need to establish the relevancy of the content in that case. Okay. Why that learning is required, and in what way this learning is going to help them. All these things you are going to tell the students. After that only you will be taking up the content. So first one is you will always start with why. You will always start with why. Okay. Now the second one is after establishing the need for the content. Okay. After establishing the need for the content, then the teacher will be going for the other points. Now in the first case, when many people will be arguing, or many people will be having a doubt, are we not teaching the why component in the case of an objective? Okay. Are we not teaching the why component? Yes, some of the teachers will be covering the why component, but most of the time the objective decides what to teach. Okay, the objective decides what to teach. When you frame an objective, you always frame it this way, that after the end of the session, the students will be able to state something there, which means the objective statement tells me that the student has to state this law, so therefore I should teach Ohm's law. Okay, therefore I should teach Ohm's law. That is how an objective is created. But in the case of an outcome, when you look at the outcome, at the end of the session or after successful completion of the session by the students will be able to state, or the students will be able to solve complex engineering problems, which means in order to solve complex engineering problem, I need to teach Ohm's law. So after teaching Ohm's law, I should also tell them what exactly is a complex engineering problem, and I should also be telling them, or I should also be educating them, how this Ohm's law is helpful for me in solving the complex engineering problem, in solving the complex engineering problem, or in coming out of the solution for this complex engineering problem. Okay. So that way we always focus. So there is I hope this one is there. I hope this thing is quite understanding, and we should be able to differentiate how an objective-centric approach is quite different from that of an outcome-centric approach. Okay. So in a nutshell, when I talk about an outcome, we always deal with context. So the teacher should be having more case studies. Okay, the teacher should be having more case studies. The teacher should be having more application-based examples. The teacher should be having more case studies, more application-based examples, and the teacher should also be having whereas the teacher should also be having the successful things there, and the failure things should also be there, and then only the students will be knowing for a particular problem what are the ways and means that we need to adapt, and how is that it has to be adapted, and what is the uniqueness of this adaptation of this option 1, and what is the failure and why the option 2 failed over there. So the why component has to be emphasized in the case of an outcome-based education. Okay, in outcome-based education, and after that we will go for content dealing, and after that we will be going in for and after that we will also be going in for the other kind of application of this content. Okay, application of this contents there. Okay, right. So I will just give you a small example, and then we will have a sort of discussion, and then we will go to the presentation. So because I got an office call, I have a meeting at 12:40. So we'll go after 12:50 close the session. So here, when I let us say when I say this thing, when I at the end of the session, at the end of the session, I am framing an objective. The students will be able to list the 7 colors of a rainbow. 7 colors of a rainbow. So when this is an objective. So when I write this objective, the students will be. I want the students to write the 7 colors of a rainbow. So what does it mean? We'll be able to say that it is arranged this way. Okay, it is with VR. Now the second objective statement I am having at the end of the session. That's a common statement. The students will be able to explain the Vidya, which means I'm just giving you a very basic Vidya, which means why it starts with the V and ends with R. Okay, why it starts with the V and ends with R. Why after V, why after violet blue is not coming, and why after blue red is not coming. Like that, the student will be able to explain the genesis behind the arrangement of these letters, alphabets in this Vidya content. So obviously, everybody should be knowing that it is arranged on the base of wavelength property. The wavelength it is arranged on the base of this wavelength, increasing wavelength. So while it is having the least wavelength, whereas red is having the longest wavelength, so therefore I will type to. Okay, therefore I will type take two. The third one is like now I want the students to give some examples. List the examples that are to be given. List the examples for the wavelength application. Okay, so where do you find the wavelength application? For that one, I am asking the students to do some examples. Wavelength application. So you can say that it is used in the traffic signals and so on, like that. You can always say it. Right. So this is a step-by-step approach, and this approach is mostly coming under this category. Mostly it comes under this objective-based education category. Objective-based education category. Now let us move on to the next one. The next one is your instructional strategy for an outcome-based. So here, mostly we want to make the students feel the importance of the topic. So for that one, I asked a question to the students: why the ambulances are painted in white? Okay, why the ambulances are painted in white? So they have to give a justification here. So they have to tell me why the ambulances are painted in white, and they also know that there is a color connectivity here. So ambulance is used for transporting accident victims or emergency exigency cases. If that is the case, why the ambulances are painted in white? They should have selected some other color, and what is the reason behind that one? So they have to brainstorm and get us the answer. So they have to brainstorm and get us the answer. From the answer that they give, we try to connect that answer with that of the context that has been taken. The same with GR context and the same explanation component for an Vidya, we will be able to establish that relationship. So therefore, you see, that is the outcome part. So finally, let us say I am going to come out with a new vehicle design. Okay, let us say I am going to send a Mars rover, or I am going to send a Moon rover to Moon. Okay, it has to go and do the research study in the Moon. What could be the probable color over here? Okay, what color should be there? What color of the equipment should be there? Whether there should be any color, or should there be no color? And in case if I am launching that one, okay, now which material has got the highest withstanding heat capacity? All these things they have to brainstorm, and then they have to give us the answer there. So that is a specialty of your outcome-based system. That is a specialty of your outcome-based education system. Okay. So your outcome-based education system, it clearly indicates that what is the application of the content, and we will be making the students realize. Okay, we will be making the students realize why the content is very much required, and we will try to connect that part that of the other parts of the students. And especially, many of the corporates are focusing on design thinking. They brand that one as design the thinking or design thinking or any other kind of thinking material, but any other kind of thinking. But why these design thinkings and other thinkings are coming into picture? Okay, so the thing here is like gone are those days where we learn some content, we use that content, or we forget that content, and then we go and use that content in a real-time scenario. Only that way we will be teaching, and we say that the R&D work will be done by the R&D people. But when I look at the corporates right now, many of them are also involved in R&D, and the corporates are also making their employees to become part of the R&D department where they can contribute and do this thing. And especially when these design thinking concepts are being adopted, so before coming out of the prototype itself, they will be trying to do the thinking process, to define the thinking, and then they will be coming out with the prototype, which in some way or other it saves money to the corporates to a very great extent. Okay, it saves money to corporates to a very great extent here. Okay, so now when you look at this instructional strategy, in the first case we started with the rule and then we went for an example. In the case of outcome-based education, we started with an example and then we went to the rule. Okay, we started with an example and then we finally decoded on the rule. So if you ask me, like in all the outcome-based education, should I go in for this example to rule approach? Definitely not. So I would say no. But we should make the students realize why the content is being taught. So to that part itself, we should be able to satisfy. But many other times our students are not focusing on that part, but they are focusing more on the what part, because when they focus more on the what part, they will be able to score good marks, and it is only the marks that are being decided in their future all these days. But we do not know what will happen in near future, maybe after 10 years or 15 years, whether the students will be running behind this kind of professional degrees, or will they be equipping themselves with some particular skill sets so that they can get some job employment and other things in the corporate sector here. So, okay, friends, now let me quickly summarize whatever has been discussed in today's afternoon session, the forenoon and afternoon session. So we started the class by discussing what exactly is an objective and outcome, and we highlighted the differences there. Second one is we looked at the 5 learning styles proposed by Felder and Silverman for educational purpose. And third one is we also looked at how the teaching and learning strategies should be. I have not focused on the learning strategy, but how the teaching instructional strategy has to be. It has to be when I go for an outcome-based education, and if at all I make use of the prior existing model, what kind of modifications are required for carrying out the existing model. So that is what we have seen here. So now when I talk about when I talk about an existing model kind of system, your outcome-based education system is very, very pertinent for making the students get themselves exposed to the application parts, make themselves equipped with the latest technological advances, and it also helps them to expand their wings. And it also, because the speciality of this one is like when I adopt different strategies, it makes them to become a lifelong learner. Okay, it makes them to become a lifelong learner. Like you kindle their mind, and that kindling will help them to go in for further information, and by seeking that further information, they will become lifelong learners. So this would be my end point here. Now let us discuss, and I request the participants to unmute themselves and interact with me if they want to get themselves clarified with respect to the points that has been discussed in this afternoon session. So over to the coordinator, Dr. Shivashankari, and as well as to the participants here.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Hello, sir. Am I audible, sir?
Yes, madam, very much. I hope so. There are no questions. Okay, so
Yes, sir. So if any participants are if you have any queries or if you request, interested to interact with our resource person, please share your queries.
I hope so. There are no queries. Okay, madam. So thank you very much, and I wholeheartedly thank the authorities of GMR Institute of Technology and the other partner institutions for having given us an opportunity to deliver a lecture on instructional strategies for outcome-based education. And I also place on record my sincere thanks to Dr. Shivashankari specifically, and I need to thank, I should also thank in person my benign director for having given permission to act as a resource person for this online lecture. And last but not the least, the participants, I thank them for their patient listening. Of course, the interaction was very minimal. It happens. Okay. So thank you, one and all.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much from the bottom of my heart for taking time from your busy schedule to be a guest speaker out at our FDP. So I think your words are enlightened to our participants. I hope so, sir. So thank you very much, sir, for your presence here.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
So participants, the link is shared in the chat box and as well as in the Telegram group, and it will be active for another 1 hour. So please complete the feedback before 2 p.m. So I repeat once again, I request all the participants to fill your feedback before 2 p.m. So very few participants are requesting us individually to extend the time. So please, before the timeline, you please fill your feedback responses.